Hi! In this video we'll talk about costs, and I have in here a table for our example of the bar in order to understand what is the point that you should choose to make your production. So imagine from the very beginning that you will produce nothing because you still have no workers, but you already have one machine and you already have bought the bar and so on. So you already have some fixed costs, let's say 1500. You still don't have any variable cost because you have not produced any quantity so far, and therefore the average cost, well, we cannot make any predictions on these last columns because we are still in the very beginning. Now imagine that in one night you make 50 cocktails. You already have one worker, you still have one machine, the fixed costs are the same, and the variable costs are 100. And remember, the variable costs include what you pay to the worker, but also the drinks that you include in the cocktails. So the average fixed costs is just dividing the 1500 by the number of cocktails that you produce. Therefore, it's 30. And the variable costs will be 2, because it's 100 divided by 50. Now remember, what is the marginal cost is the additional cost that you have per each cocktail. So in this case, it's just 2. Let's see another example. Imagine that in another night you produce more because you have hired another worker, but you still have one machine. So the fixed costs are the same. The variable costs will increase not only because you have an extra worker, but also because you produce more cocktails. So in this case, the variable costs will be 150. If you divide the fixed and variable costs by the quantities, you have in here 50, 1.5, and finally the marginal cost. Remember, you just have to see what were the additional units that you have produced and what was the additional cost that you had. So in this case, the marginal cost is just 1. Finally, imagine that in one great night you produce 500 cocktails. It was amazing. You still have 2 workers, 1 machine, so the fixed costs are the same, and the variable costs increase, but they increase more than what you expect, because in that night that was so great, these 2 workers really needed an extra machine, and they didn't have, so you still had to pay to them the wage, you still had to spend some drinks, but you didn't have another machine to produce even more cocktails. So when we look at the average cost, we have in here just 3 euros in terms of fixed costs, 1.7 in terms of variable costs. Note that they have increased. Why? Because you still have to pay the workers that are not producing as much cocktails as they wanted, because they don't have any ice on the machine. Finally, the marginal cost has also increased to 1.75. So looking at this table from a global perspective, what is the point that you should choose for your production? Well, is the point where you have already decreased the average fixed costs, but also the point where you reach the minimum possible variable average cost. Why? Because at some point, if you don't increase capital, you still have to pay to your workers, but they will not produce as much as you want.